Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going beyond basic movie criticism to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari, and with me today is...
Adam.
And we are overanalyzing the entire genre
of Indiana Jones.
Yes.
Particularly the Dial of Destiny in particular.
Yes, so that is our latest. The only one not directed by Steven Spielberg, directed by James Mangold, where the previous four have all been Spielberg creations.
Yep.
Okay, so...
We do rankings.
Yes.
Let's start with 5.
So I want to say, so let's just get the obvious out of the way first. In the 5 movies, there's 1 and 2.
Oh, for
there's
sure.
a big gap.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And there's 3, 4, and 5, and
Yeah.
we may differ between those, but there's not. I don't believe that our opinions would differ on the fact that 2 are just way better,
Than
or
the
3
others.
are way worse. However you want to. All right, so number 5. I've struggled with this one.
To me, it was kind of obvious after the going to the newest one, and I know I've had a thing for recency, which I don't care about. It's what makes this kind of fun, liking a new thing. So number 5 for me was really easy. A movie I like and have defended for almost 15 years. However, is the worst one, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah, so I talked to a lot of people about doing this podcast and reviewing all of Indiana Jones, and everyone's like, Crystal Skull's the worst. And I was like, when was the last time you saw Temple of Doom?
Yeah.
Because we saw them, pretty much back to back, and you're like, y'all, Temple of Doom. It's really not it's not appreciably worse than Temple of Doom.
No, I don't think so. But... Wait, I do think it's worse. Yeah.
It's worse, but it's not, much worse.
No, yeah. It's the worst one. To me, even watching the new one, I think the most jarring part of the 4th one is just how bad the CGI has aged. And how just kind of... There's a lot of really funny stuff along the way, but it's very, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And it's kind of... I don't know if I would say boring, but it's not very interesting. It seemed like Spielberg, I was talking to a buddy about this, he just seemed like he didn't care on that one.
Yeah, so suffice it to say your 5 and 4 are going to be Crystal Skull, and then Dial of Destiny is 4? No?
Nope.
Okay, so I have really, I don't have, again... my bottom 3, I don't have really solid reasons for why any of them are in each position. I'm inclined to go with Dial of Destiny as my 5th. But only because, I just started to get bored. It dragged on a lot. And I was like, I can't actually say, I got bored with any of the others.
Okay.
So I'm going to give the 5th slot to the newest one. But again, it's not a strong...
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't hate it. I
didn't hate it. And I also am I didn't hate it so much worse than the other 2 in this bottom tier category. So your number 4 is...
the Temple of Doom.
Okay.
Which is funny because I really liked that one as a kid. It was the scariest. But there are just so many parts of it that...
It's the best one if you're 8.
Well. Yeah, there's just so much in it where it's just liking anything about this is kind of a stretch. There's also a lot of really great things in it. The minecart sequence is great. Short Round is great.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with 4 as Crystal Skull. I'm Short Round alone. I'm I'm man, but Short Round's so great. I bumps Temple of Doom up. But again, it's not a large bump. They're all kind of in the mix together. Crystal Skull, again, I ended up being prepared to just absolutely hate it because everybody said it was terrible. And I was like, it's not that bad. And it was very... I think this one slightly less so for obvious reasons. But I was like, it was very much in the spirit.
Yeah.
of Indiana Jones. Like, it wasn't...
They moved him into a new time really well, too. I think with, like, the 50s aspect of it felt very real and different from the other movies in, like, a cool way.
And I really liked, I would say, of the reboots, like, you know, searching for meaning in the most recent one. Whereas I would say with Crystal Skull, like, there was a lot of pointed commentary about McCarthyism and the Cold War and the Red Scare, and I was like, okay, you're trying to do something. I can appreciate that.
Well, I think this new one, I like that they snuck in the Nazis getting us into space.
Oh, yes.
I love
no,
that
you're right.
aspect
No,
of the
that's
movie.
completely true. That's so... Like, I was like...
That's just something that's so far off, like, a lot of people's radar.
I was like... It was a very pointed critique against Werner Braun, right?
Yeah.
Like, real... Yeah, no, you're right. That actually was in there, and I was like, no, that is a fair point. So I'll rescind that comment. But, I mean, I did think that the aliens thing was...
It's just, like, and I mean, it's like some of the stuff, it almost comes off like it was something making fun of one of these movies. Like, the knowledge is their treasure line is such a groaner.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It was very clunky, but I have a very soft spot in my heart for that movie as well.
Right. So I would say, and then people are like, oh my god, sci-fi. I was like, I don't know that time travel is any better. Like...
Well, we'll get to that. This is the first time you saw The Crystal Skull ever?
Yes.
So that was a big deal movie. I guess I was about to graduate college when that movie came out. It was like the summer right before I did. Everybody was excited for that movie, and almost everyone I knew hated it so much. And it was just kind of like, why?
Yeah, I don't think it deserves quite that bad a reputation. Okay, so recap and then give 3.
5 is The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull,
Okay.
4 is The Temple of Doom, and 3, I said The Dial of Destiny, the newest one.
Okay, so then my 3rd goes to Temple of Doom.
Gotcha. And then
Okay.
I bet we're the same on this.
I really don't know. I feel like you're going to go rogue on me.
Number 2 is The Last Crusade.
Okay, so
Yeah.
no, we're in agreement. Last Crusade and then Raiders number 1.
Yeah, I think this is a case. I try not to be into, like, the first being the best of anything. I think it's like a dangerous road to go down. But I think it's kind of obvious in this case. It's just got everything from the beginning and is just front to back the best.
I mean, obviously it's my ranking too, so I don't disagree with you. I know quite a few people who would put 3.
Me too.
3 over Last Crusade over Raiders. So I was like, I think he's gonna go the same as me, but I was like, if you hadn't, I wouldn't have been shocked.
Yeah, I really like that movie. It's very close, but it's just it's not like a hard call.
Yeah, I think it capitalizes on. I think Last Crusade capitalizes on everything that's, like, good about Raiders and then doesn't do any of the bad things about Temple, right? Like, it kind of was okay, we made some mistakes, like, let's pull ourselves back.
Yeah. It was like, I wasn't really, I was alive at the time that movie came out, but it was like 89, I think it was like, I was 2. So I wasn't sort of, like, obviously aware that, like, sort of buzz around it, but it did very much seem like a course correction.
Yeah.
Because, like, my whole life, I remember people not liking the Temple of Doom either. And that being, like...
Yes.
So people that would, like, go so far as to not, like, when the first, like, DVD box set would come out, like, people would not keep the disc in it. Like, it's like...
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, so I saw Last Crusade in the theaters, having seen the other 2, like, on home video or on TV or whatever. And yes, like, again, even as a small child, I was well aware that people didn't like Temple of Doom. But as a small child, I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Like, I remember just really liking Temple of Doom and would have said, again, at 8, I would have told you that was my favorite one.
Yeah, I had a contrarian streak for a while going where just based, again, like, I love minecarts. So just based on that sequence, that's my favorite one. But mostly just to annoy people. This was as an adult in my very early 20s. But I mean, this is like not true.
Yeah. And so I do think like this latest one very much tried to keep it in the spirit. I wouldn't say that it was a departure. Like, no. It felt like it's to its credit, it felt like an Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah, and I think it accomplished that really well without Steven Spielberg. Mm-hmm. In a way that, I think that this isn't like, we don't really like stump for him, I feel like, on this podcast. He's kind of like,
I'm a hater.
Yeah, we're not like, drinking the Kool-Aid. I don't hate or really particularly like care about him.
So I guess like I'm only a hater because like when I see his modern stuff, I'm like, but you made E.T. I know it's in you. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
he is like definitely someone who could just stop making movies and it would kind of be the same if he continued making movies. Like, he's made some awful stuff.
Yes.
Recently. But anyway, whatever you think about him, I do think he's kind of like, no matter what, a key ingredient in this sort of thing. And I think this movie felt, like you said, of the spirit with a new person who also wasn't sort of slavishly stealing from his playbook necessarily either. Yeah. It was kind of a really good sort of like anonymous job.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
And from a director who I think has made some like of the greatest Western possibly of the last 15 years, should have directed Stallone to an Oscar with Copland, best superhero movie. Like, he's done some really great stuff and could have, even from the get-go was like, I'm just kind of like filling in on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, did not, resisted the urge to put his own stamp on it.
No ego.
Yeah, which was really impressive. I will say though, like, there's a few things. Let me just say, like, relooking through the whole of the oeuvre, right? Or like through all the movies as an adult and thinking about it and talking about it, I was like, I definitely feel like Indiana Jones destroyed more priceless artifacts than he saved.
Oh, yeah.
And was actually an incredibly horrible, destructive force. And it's kind of hard to think of him as a good guy.
Yeah, I think there's like little references to that in the new movie, which are kind of funny.
Yeah, I liked her grave robber line. I was like, thank you.
She was
needed
great,
to be pointed out.
By the way, just to throw that out there. Love that character.
I did too. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, but I felt like she was yet a different sort of female co-lead, right?
Yeah.
Obviously not a romantic interest this time, but, had her own personality and character. And I kind of liked that she was sort of unscrupulous.
She was unscrupulous in a way that, like, he wasn't really in the other movies. Because you got a sense he was never really in it for the money.
No, and his, like, this should be in a museum.
Yeah, he's definitely like a rogue, like, operator. But he's not... you never get a sense that, like, he in any of these other movies that are like this, people are hunting for treasure so that they can become rich.
Right.
And that never seems to be on his mind at all.
Right. For sure.
Just that the stuff itself is cool.
Yeah. And he has a deep appreciation for it, but it's also like, but then you go around destroying like entire rooms full of things, and you're like,
almost by your presence alone.
Yeah, I was like, we should have just left it alone.
Yeah.
And I think they do sort of point out, I think you see hints of it in Crystal Skull too, if I remember correctly, like this sort of idea of like, this belongs in a museum as, in our modern sensibilities, sort of feeling like, okay, now you're just like looting other people's stuff, and taking it back to a museum in America.
Yeah,
which is
or like in Europe. How did you feel about the beginning with the young, de-aged Harrison Ford?
I for all my complaints about CGI, and I do think they were an issue in the past two movies, for sure. I think the de-aging always looks great. Like, I kind of never have a feeling of like, this looks really fake and obvious. Like, I not sure we really needed the setup, though. Like, plot-wise, did we really need that whole set piece?
So I think yes, only because it was the only sequence of sort of like World War II era Indiana Jones. So like he's always fighting the Nazis in movies 1 and 3. And this is when, his country is at war with them. And I thought that was really interesting to see him be a part of. I expected you to say this, and I'm going to say it. Why not just have a younger actor? Like River Phoenix in The Last Crusade. Like, you could have just done that.
Yeah, you could have.
And it would have been fine, and it would have cost a lot less money.
Yes.
And it probably would have looked better.
Yeah. I guess, like, again, either way, I don't mind it. I'm always great to see Toby Jones. Like,
yeah.
So I was like, if that reason alone was the reason to do this, I'm fine with it. I do think it made a sort of nice connection between in Crystal Skull, where they talk about like what he did after Raiders in the ensuing years, like how he basically becomes like an agent, and
Yeah.
I was like, well, that was nice because you sort of tied together like what types of things he would have been doing this whole time.
Another interesting thing about it, too, is I think it was a very good transition to sort of what I thought was one of the more interesting themes in the movie, was how old he is. And that he is playing a character who is that age. He is,
Yeah.
I've been, with time of filming, I think he was 79. And so we'll say the character's like in his 70s in this movie, for sure. And I think they did a lot of really cool stuff with that, without also making it like he's an old man, without it being he's still superhuman. It kind of towed a good line, for me at least. And I think that set up at the beginning from sort of, I guess, was that about 25 years earlier in the timeline of this movie, I think kind of bridged that gap really well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just felt like we have Indy in the past already. Like, why do we need more of it? And especially, like, I found, like, by the time they got to the boat, I was like, I'm exhausted.
Really?
Like, I'm just tired. There's been action piece after action piece after action piece, and I'm like, I need you to, like, there's too many bumps and wrong way. I needed it to be, like, winding to an end at this point. I did not need one more whole location and...
I guess we'll get to this then, because for the whole movie, I was thinking, I don't want them to actually use this device.
Yes.
However, when they're in the plane, and those clouds show up, and they start to use it, I'm sitting there in the theater, I don't want this movie to end now. I want them to go back in time. I want that to happen. And then, spoiler alert, it does, and is really awesome.
I hated it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I really didn't like the time travel aspect. I did not get what they were trying to tell me about how it was always going to take them back then. I was like, there was some sort of exposition that I was like, I'm confused.
Because they thought they could manipulate it to whenever they wanted.
Right.
Or that it was either that or that he had the date wrong. That it was just like one thing that it was going to do. And
yeah, I mean, I think that was the impression you were left. It was only really going to do the one thing, and there was kind of no way around that. And
there was a little bit in there about how, like, that was always going to happen. Like, that little, like, time loop.
Right,
bit.
which I appreciate.
Yeah.
I'm, in the whole, like, much as I love Back to the Future, I'm not a fan of...
With the physics of it.
You can actually change your current time. You're like, no, your current time is a result already of you having gone back and changed things. So, I did like that they like made it a closed loop in the watch and everything. But I was sort of like, this is so silly. I just
really. I guess I couldn't say I'm surprised. But the one other thing I really liked about that sequence is how Mads Mikkelsen, upon finding out and realizing how the mistake that they have made, completely loses his mind and becomes like a crying child while their aircraft is getting hit with catapults or whatever they had. And the other people are, all right, like, we'll try to figure something out, like what's going on. And he's like in a corner, like sucking on his thumb, basically.
Yeah.
I thought that was like a really... This movie, the escalation of like the Nazi punching and everything, I thought was like the best. And just seeing that kind of like this character like really like taken down like that, it was like, this feels good.
And so I think what was successful so much about Raiders and Last Crusade is that the comeuppance is quite small, right? Like it's small as in like it's not an action-packed moment when it happens. And I guess it feels so strongly a moment of hubris for the actors. Like, you should not have been looking for this, for the Holy Grail or the Ark in the first place. You're not meant to have this. Like, and this is going to be the agent of your destruction. And I didn't find that you know, going back in time, being the agent of it didn't feel as earned somehow. Like,
oh, really? Yeah. It's like the whole time he's thinking, I'm smarter than everybody. You know, like, I'm smarter than Hitler. You know, and
but not Archimedes.
Yeah, sure enough, when you just finally get it, you go there and are reduced to a crying child, and everyone else around you kind of like handles theirs. And also, I guess if we're really getting into the ending, I liked the this sort of like idea, like he's gonna like in basically they come out in this crazy battle, and Indiana Jones decides that he's going to stay behind. And not letting that happen, I thought was really great. I was like, if this is how this character goes out, I will hate this movie.
Yeah.
Even though I liked everything that came before it. I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, although I did think, you know, as an archaeologist, that I could totally get the impulse to want to stay.
Yeah.
Right?
But you just don't get to do that, you know? Like, I felt very real to me that in this, like, sort of moment where it's like a selfish act that you think isn't selfish.
Yeah.
You know, and I do like to, like, it felt very real that she was, like, I'm blanking on, Helena Shaw, that's her name.
Yeah.
She wasn't going to spell out for him that, like, she wanted him to come back.
Yeah.
And no, I like that, because it's like, we know that.
Right,
like,
right.
We've watched that's, like, the strongest bond in the movie.
Yeah. Agreed.
At least it's presenting it that way. And, like, we don't need that spelled out for us.
Yeah. So I also like that they never explained Wombat. I was like, good, don't explain it. We don't need to know where that comes from or what.
They know what it means.
Yeah, exactly. I will say, though, to that end, I was a little disappointed with the like literal final moment.
Really? I like
where
that.
Where you know, cute. It's like literally his hat, he's hung his hat up.
But then he snatches it back.
I know, and I was like, let's be done. He's 80. Like,
they're done.
Yeah. You know, I was like, just keep the hat where I was like, I kind of liked it better. I will say, though, for this one movie, for whoever else who caught it, there was one really random and out of left field bit of homage in this movie that I was like,
the kissing the wounds?
No, that was great.
I like that.
That was terrific. The random money pit callback. So the missile lands in the carpet with the hole in the floor and goes sinking down in the beginning when the Americans are bombing the like Nazi mansion. And that's
mansion. Like
when Tom Hanks in Money Pit he walks on that carpet.
I've never seen that.
And he falls through the hole.
I thought you were saying
and he gets stuck, and it's like, it looks like the same carpet too.
I actually really like the lack of sort of like winking references to other Indiana Jones movies. It's like a thing a lot of the time in these nostalgia things. It's like, we're going to like reference this moment. And they saved it for the end, and it was good. And that's all they really needed to do.
Yeah.
We know what we're watching. They had confidence in sort of like, because regardless of how the films are received, everyone, or most people, have seen all of them. And if they haven't, it's the fourth one. Yeah. So we know what we're watching. We don't need, here's a reference to this. Recreating the wounds getting kissed moment. Like, they would remember that. Right. That would have been a big deal. Yeah. It's flipped too, which I thought was good. And that would have been just like a really, like, formative moment for those characters to bring up at that point in their lives. Right. And I definitely feel like, given everything we know about the two of them from all the other movies, I'm not like horribly surprised this marriage didn't. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, they had kind of a rough road. Yeah.
I did appreciate was it in Crystal Skull where they're arguing and she was like, you just left and what was I supposed to tell you? And he's like, well, I could never win an argument with you. And then she's like, well, then learn to argue better. Like, yeah. I was like, that is so like, I was like, I really appreciated like how much they did a good job like recreating their dynamic.
Yeah. It was, I also, how did you feel about getting rid of
Shia
Henry
LaBeouf.
Jones the Third?
Yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, let's tackle Shia LaBeouf.
Died in Nam. Spoiler.
I mean, like, so this is one of those, again, I always say this to people, I'm like, I always kind of remember you from the first thing I ever saw you in, and I was like, I just remember him as Hilary Duff's little brother on that Nickelodeon show. Like, there's something about him that is, like, kind of never... I haven't seen too much of his work. I didn't watch any of the Transformers stuff, but I was like, he's just a real non-entity for me. Yeah.
Well, he's a bit problematic now. As well, which is the real reason I think he was written out of that movie.
I mean, I don't think so.
Really?
Well, because I think, okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I mean, I think the attempt in Crystal Skull was to sort of pass the mantle on to him. And they never made another movie, but that was before he was canceled, I think.
No, it was, for sure.
I don't think audiences were too in love with that character or wanted to see him take over. So I don't think he would have been in it regardless. He's just not leading man material. Yeah. Like,
and particularly not for this character.
Right.
Which is already so... Like, it's a lot of actors have played Indiana Jones if you count the TV shows, but we all know who really is Indiana Jones, don't we? You know, like, I don't think people are ready to buy him in particular. Yeah, and it's just such, I mean, he's not close to Harrison Ford. No. It's like a real step down, as it were. It's just kind of a no-go with that one in general. But I was definitely happy. I was like, is he going to, like, show up and annoy me in this movie? But he didn't. Yeah. Which I appreciated.
So this is ironically looking after our Scream review, yet another sequel that transposed itself to New York City for no good reason.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't feel one way or another about it, though.
I like that. I thought it's a lot of CGI, but I thought it looked good. I liked the parade sequence, and I thought it was cool. It's like he kind of like, where's the worst place that he would end up, right? He's like washed up, and be it like a big. Like, I assume the college was in a tall building, and he's like in this sort of like, for someone who spends so much time in the real jungle, he's like in the concrete jungle, and he's like another, resident of that sort of environment, which he never really was before. It's kind of like, I feel like did a good job of showing how far he had fallen.
Yeah, and I think, like, I guess to me, which I thought Last Crusade did so successfully, like, they put that backstory in. Who knows if it was always there to begin with, but it really made sense for the character that he would be this Wild West guy who then kind of was splitting his identity between being Indiana Jones and that guy and like this East Coast academic Professor Jones.
And to that point, too, another really interesting part of that movie is the guy who gives him the hat, who is he's rating... the artifacts for the highest bidder, and he kind of gives him that first lesson, and I feel like young Indiana Jones is just like, I'm not going to go in this direction. Right. And that's like more or less what the guy was telling him, was kind of like, you get to decide how you want to sort of live and conduct yourself. You don't like, I beat you, but you don't have to like that at all. Like, that's the line itself, but it's like, you don't have to be okay with this. Do something about it.
Yeah. No, it's really good. And I think, it did seem like, transposing it to New York City for that character to seem like it was in his own personal hell. Yeah. Right?
That's how low he had gone. Yeah.
But I would say, I mean, the thing that, I had commented on this when we did the rewatch, the thing that I had really had really stuck out to me, especially in Temple of Doom, was the thousands of extras in that movie. Like, there are just so many friggin' people in that movie. And then, with the 2 more modern ones, now you get CGI backdrops, it doesn't at all feel like they're moving through a real space and that there are real people around them. And
I thought Crystal Skull was far more or less populated than the new one.
Right, I guess, but with this one, when it was populated by fake people, so it didn't come off.
Yeah.
It was equally bad. I would rather just not hire the extras and not try to fake it that way than have the fake people, especially, again, coming off of, all those children that were in Temple of Doom.
Yeah, just so many people.
Yeah.
Almost all the sequences.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of people around.
Yeah, there's just... I did love seeing Salah and the story of him being he helped him emigrate to America from Egypt. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I was glad he didn't go too. He had his it kind of allowed that character his own bit of unfulfilled nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been again pushing it if it's I'm gonna come too.
I'm not gonna.
But it's I didn't need that.
Yeah. I did think from the previews that she was going to be his kid, though. I was a little confused by that. Yeah. I was like, we're introducing a whole other character. Okay, then.
It didn't work for me.
Yeah, it was fine. I just was like, that's kind of where I thought we were going. I thought that the fight against the Nazis sort of starts out as a very kind of good against evil, just who's the worst villain we can have? Nazis, right? And I did feel like it came back around in having the Nazis as being a critique of the post-war period, A, but also B, of the rise of the alt-right and the return of Nazis to America.
Yeah, which is why I thought that initially I was kind of curious about this, but so he has one of my favorite bad guys usually playing the B bad guy, which he was in this movie, Boyd Holbrook as sort of the second in command, who's a good actor, but he's one of those people, he's always has a southern accent, and they never explain it, and I'm like, good, because there's people like that here that want to wear that uniform, and it's why do they want to do that? It doesn't make any sense, and I thought that was almost, I don't know if it was intentional, but it worked for me. Of course he's gonna attract people. He doesn't need to hide this aspect of his plan from his henchmen. It's not going to be a big surprise. It's I got these suckers. They think they're doing this other thing, but really it's for Nazis. They're like, oh yeah, cool. We'll be on your side when you kill Hitler and take over the world. Why not?
Yeah. No, totally. And so I thought I don't, I'm fine. We don't always review these movies because they're hard to talk about, but I'm fine with a movie not having social commentary. You can have it be a fun ride, and that's fine as well. But I did think it wasn't very heavy-handed, but I thought that it was a good use of reintroducing Nazis and making it relevant. And
I wanted, since I have a platform right now, I will never get tired of watching those people get hurt in movies ever. It's so great.
It's great, but there's also, I find it's so interesting. So, I find the less, I punched a Nazi thing is, less fun for me than, seeing the whole, American, or I guess it was actually the British Air Force, coming overhead and bombing the crap out of everybody. I was like, take that, suckers!
And that's why you got your opening sequence point right there.
I'm like, I want the big. Yeah. That's when I want the big.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
you can have both.
Right.
Great.
Right. And I thought it was an interesting, with Oppenheimer coming out a few weeks later, I was the criticism of the post-war hiring of Nazis. I was like, this is an interesting time to make this commentary as well.
Yeah.
So, I did enjoy that. Which is, I said, my bottom 3, there are all things that I like and dislike about all of them. It's a very mushy ranking.
Yeah.
I think that they all had some good parts.
Yeah. There's not a single one of these movies I would skip or not watch. If I'm going to watch all the Indiana Jones movies, I would watch all of them in order, and that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you out there who have not given Crystal Skull a chance, like, I would say...
Don't be lame and hate that movie.
It's not that bad.
Like, it's such
you
an
can do Temple of Doom
thing to care about.
Yeah.
It's so... When Star Wars started doing new movies in 2015 and there was the whole toxic fandom, that really, I felt like, got its start with Crystal Skull, except it was just that the movie was bad to these people. It wasn't that they had minorities in it or, women and stuff like that. It was just nobody liked the movie and had an outsized, insane... Like, I remember the time very vividly of people just like, hating that movie. And it's just like, who cares?
So you bring up a good point in terms of, like, the rebootology of it all. And I think, I said it earlier, but now you're making the point about Star Wars, which I hated all the new Star Wars. I was like, and what I hated about them was, like, they had none of the spirit of fun of the original three. And they just made them sort of ponderous and serious, and I was just like, but these were, like, really kind of fun, campy movies. Like, why did you take all that away? And I will say, like, I think that's part of why I give Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny a chance, is because, like, for better or for worse, they're Indiana Jones movies. They feel like Indiana Jones movies. They don't try to overstuff it with modern things that, like, are weird course corrections from previous things. Like, it's very campy, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's just an action-packed romp. Like, you want it, and Treasure Hunt, like, you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And I would say this is one of the few ones that has sort of successfully done that.
Yeah. Not that, a lot of people would agree, unfortunately, but I think that's true. Well, there's nothing that's been this span and the same thing, per se. Like, Star Wars, you have the 9 movies or whatever that...
Yeah.
But they're just so... This is pretty much more or less on one person's shoulders, one character.
Right.
That has consistently been the same timeline and has been
we have
40
the Scream
years almost.
All right, and
that even with that, like, that's a much shorter time period. That's like 20 years.
Yeah.
And for sure, yes, I would be inclined to agree. But, like, in terms of just, like, the huge budget stuff, because Scream is, like, the antithesis of that, which is absolutely a great thing.
Yes.
But just, like, a big money machine that has not been, for lack of, like,
Avatar,
messed with, though, by the outside world.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for lack of creativity, which does kind of suck. I did, and again, I guess I feel like, I kind of hope this is the last one, I guess.
It
Maybe
is.
They're thinking of Phoebe
done.
Waller-Bridge. Yeah, he's done. I mean, I guess I'm like, are they going to try to carry it on with her? I don't know.
I think at this point in time, there are no plans to do that.
Okay. Then I'm like, for such a beloved character who's been a part of our lives for so long, like, I'm like, I mean, yeah, I'm just as susceptible to nostalgia as anybody else.
Sure.
Like, I can't be all cranky about a new Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah, I imagine it would probably be a reboot entirely, if I had to guess.
All right, so again, taking the character of, like, Indiana Jones and all of them as a whole, I think that, like, the legacy is sort of undeniable.
For sure.
For the movies.
Yeah. Are we social impact scoring this one in particular?
Again, no.
Okay.
Because it's sort of like, okay, this one just borrows on all the things that have come before. Like, it's kind of hard to give this one a social impact score.
Sure.
I would say we'll give it to Raiders.
Sure, yeah. 7 or 8 for the whole series. Something like that. They sneak in a lot of cool stuff. A lot of, not a lot of stuff about busting artifacts, but I feel like as they go on, they kind of age into that. And I like that they had, an old character. And again, I like that they, threw some shade at the space race.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a quintessentially good action movie, right? Like, it has enough character that you're invested. There isn't yucky love stuff, because the love stuff, other than the Kate Capshaw, which we'll just pretend that didn't happen, like, all the Marion stuff, like, it totally works. Like, you're rooting for them. It's not a side plot that I feel is shoehorned into this whole thing. It's not
annoying. And then the third one, I feel like they dispatched with that as well, really, in a really good way.
But I'm like, I was like genuinely invested in the two of them, and they have great banter, they have great chemistry. It only adds to the movie, it doesn't detract. Yeah, so the chemistry between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery is amazing and really fun and enjoyable in Last Crusade. Like, and you know, fights on cars, fights on trains, fights with planes. Like, you know, like, there's just such a... There's, like, for lack of better word, there's such a, like, joie de vivre about those movies.
Oh, yeah. There's swashbuckling without being pirate movies.
It's a perfect way, and I was like, you know, I don't want to see a bunch of dumb CGI explosions. Like, this is what is fun to me about action movies, and I feel like it's been a dying breed lately. And I think that not every movie has to be super serious. Like, not every movie has to be, like, movies that matter, social commentary. Like, that's fine. Like, I just want to enjoy myself sometimes. And I think that I think watching them again and seeing this latest one really reminded me of, like, its legacy of, can't we just, like, punch some Nazis and have a good time? Like, you know? Yeah. So I love this series. I think honestly, on score alone, you'd be like 10 out of 10.
Oh, yeah. Great.
I mean, that is so, but I'm like, yeah, I mean, this is literally one of the most memorable movie scores of all time.
For sure.
So, yeah. All right. On that note, recommendations for the week?
I've been a smaller movie that's landing in July that is super crowded with blockbuster content that is also a larger release itself that I'm really looking forward to is Insidious, The Red Door. So I've been rewatching that franchise. This concerns our world and then a sort of spiritual world that can kind of infiltrate ours in some more nefarious ways, that it has, to me, the edge on all this recent possession stuff with being non-religious. It's a spiritual. Cool.
I'm going to recommend, this is just a little bit off track, but I've been enjoying I generally love a good BBC mystery series type thing, but that can be hit or miss sometimes. I was a slow burn for me on Vienna Blood.
Okay.
But
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's like, it's a very different, it doesn't have the typical sort of BBC English detective. It's atmospheric and it's fun. It's not your typical fare. And support your local PBS stations, people. All right. Feel free to tell us how our rankings are completely wrong, and in fact you like The Last Crusade the best. Because I defy you to not have that separation. If you're a Temple of Doom lover, I guess we want to hear from you.
All opinions are welcome.
Yeah, check out our website, Movies That Matter.
Most are.
So check out moviesthatmatterpodcast.com. Email us at moviesmatterpod@gmail.com. Leave a comment on our YouTube page. People have been doing that recently, which is fun. We read them, we enjoy them. We might talk back if you have something to say or have a question for us. We have a Facebook page. All of this is the links are in the show notes. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We will see you next time.